My name is Alan McLaren. I am the co-founder of STRATA Originals. And on this podcast, we interview originals. As the name implies, originals are people who stand out by the lessons and the stories they share with us to all help us learn as leaders and as humans. And today we're about to have a great conversation with my good friend, John Torrens. We call him JT, just so you know. Not the golfer. JT is also a golfer, but that's not you. You're not the golfer. So, John's a professor of entrepreneurial practice at Syracuse University. Go Orange. Um, at the university's Whitman School of Management, he's been teaching, mentoring, and coaching aspiring and established entrepreneurs for over 15 years, which is incredible because he's only 35. He's also the deputy department chair and program manager for the full-time MS in entrepreneurship and the online entrepreneurship at Syracuse program, where he oversees the curriculum, faculty, and student outcomes. Not surprisingly, John's also an entrepreneur, as currently the executive director of Sprout Therapy Group and Sprout Therapy Management, two companies that provide early childhood special education and therapy services and solutions. Also a Fulbright Specialist, an author, a board member, TEDx speaker with expertise in speech and language therapy, social networking, new business development, leadership development. And believe it or not, he has ADHD, which we're going to talk a little bit today. Doesn't look like it. He looks like he's focused for a moment. Who knows? John's also a longstanding member of YPO, and John and I met on the international board. We served together for 3 years and have kept our friendship up over all that time. So learning ahead, people. John, welcome to Strata Originals.
Alan, thank you so much for having me here. Really looking forward to the conversation.
So let's begin. There's a couple of things I wanted to share with everybody. Today we're going to talk about John's story, his YPO journey, his professional insights, a little bit about his book and TED Talk on ADHD, and finally the pursuit of a new passion of his, pursuit of longevity. So a ton to
Mm.
pack in there. So John, let's begin with an icebreaker. I feel at my best when, finish the sentence for us.
Mm. When everything is in balance, right? So I'm doing the things I need to do for myself and I'm doing things I need to do for my business and my family. When I'm in balance, I feel like I'm at my best.
And what does balance mean for you? Do you go out of balance sometimes? Does it, like, what's your view of balance? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's just managing everything I need in terms of mental, physical, spiritual health,
Okay.
right? If I can check all those boxes, maybe not every day, but throughout the course of a week, if I can plan accordingly and make sure I'm getting something in that nourishes each one of those three domains, then yeah, then I feel like I'm in balance and I can be a better husband, better father, better friend, and so on.
Is it intentional for you to do that, to think about those things?
It is, yeah, yeah. I make a point of prioritizing those things throughout my day, throughout my week, because I know just from recent experience that if I do that, I perform better on everything else that I'm involved in.
That's awesome. What a great lesson for everybody. Intentionality matters, and waking up with those goals in mind and achieving them every day is just is the way to be truly fulfilled, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And it's hard too because especially when you're starting a company or scaling a company or you're running a large company, those self-care things, mental, physical, and spiritual health are often the first things to go, right? You just sometimes you don't have time for those because you've got all these other urgent demands. So yeah, being intentional about it, super important. And the research is pretty clear showing that there is a real ROI to prioritizing those domains.
I know I always just like to take wherever we take the conversation, but part of your world is entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Do you ever have conversations with entrepreneurs about your life and your experience? Because what I find is a lot of them are all in, right? At the expense of everything else, family.
Mhm.
And then as you mentor them later, you kind of go, well, how did that go? Well, I don't really know my wife. I don't really know my kids. Have you ever had that conversation with those aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so a lot of times I do, and I'm trying to get better at it. I've got this thing where I listen a lot more than I speak, and then that even works in my mentoring relationships. I listen a lot more because I feel like that's how I learn what I need to learn about the person that I'm helping. And it's not uncommon for people to be to know me for weeks or months. And when I finally tell them something, they're like, hi, I didn't know that about you. And so it's something that I know I need to work on a little bit more. So yes, sharing my story is often helpful for young and aspiring entrepreneurs, but I do get into this zone where I do a lot more listening than speaking.
That's what a good professor does. That's great. So let's begin. Let's kind of take that as a jumping off point. So you've done a lot of great things in your life. What's the backstory? How did John get to where he is, 35 years old and a professor? I know you
No,
look like
you're kind. No, I'll be how old am I? I'll be 57 this coming July. So
you're still
yeah,
a puppy. You're still young, but
I know. I,
you look
I
great.
feel it. I
You
can
look
feel
great.
it. Yeah.
You look
Well,
great.
I think like most people my age who are entrepreneurs, I did it as a kid, right? Like I wanted pocket money, so I shoveled driveways, I mowed lawns, I walked dogs, I babysat, even though I didn't necessarily love to do that. I gravitated more towards the lawn mowing and snow shoveling, right? The more of the physical activities. But yeah, I just did that as a way to hustle and earn some money. And as I got older, as a high school kid or a college kid, I had to work to earn money to pay bills or have fun or do whatever. And I just realized that uh, I don't make a great employee. This job at the university is the only real job I've ever had for any significant period of time. I've always just worked for my own companies. So the fact that I'm still a professor at Syracuse University, I think speaks a lot for how much I love it and how good the university is for neurodiverse people in professor positions. But yeah, I just realized that I wanted to control my own time and destiny and that sort of thing. So I think like a lot of people in my situation, I just gravitated towards entrepreneurship. I was a decent student, but I always did the math and I said, okay, what's the effort that I can put out to get a good enough grade just to pass? I wasn't the kid who was getting into the credentials arms race because I wanted to go to an Ivy League school and then work at Goldman and run for Senate or God knows what. That wasn't me, right? I just wanted to get through school, have some fun, and go off on my own. And I think just the way I'm wired, led me in that direction as well.
So you say you're not a good employee. How did you know that when you weren't ever an employee? What was it about what you knew about yourself? Self-reflection now.
Well, like the jobs I did have as a high school or college kid, I was not super dependable. Like I was a cashier at a convenience store, and I if I didn't want to go to work, I would just call somebody and say, "Hey, could you cover my shift?" And I just it wasn't a priority, right? So it was not super dependable for those types of jobs because other things were more fun or more exciting, and I wanted to do other things, right? I didn't, and generally, I didn't like people telling me what to do or how to do it. Um, so I think as a profile for a potential employee in that kind of setting, I was horrible.
Do you see that in the young men and women that you work with? Can you look at some of those and go, not an employee, you are an entrepreneur, and vice versa? Oh, you think you're an entrepreneur, but no. Do you see that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, especially in our entrepreneurship major, a lot of the students, they just know that they want to go off on their own or be in charge of their own venture or something. Or a lot of them are intuitive enough to know that maybe they need to go work for a small company or a company that's scaling in order to get the experience and the contacts in order to start their own company. But I think more than in my experience where it was just really about I didn't like people telling me what to do or how to do it. I think the students that I work with have this impression that is that really all there is to life is you finish college, you get a job, you work from 9 to 5 for 40 or 50 years and you retire, and then what? I think they're really starting to feel that there's got to be more to life than that, and I can see it, I can feel it. So those who are taking that path, they're not buying into that, right? The things that we did in our generation, like, hey, you go to college, you get a job, you pay your bills, you have a mortgage, you bring your kids to soccer practice, whatever it is, they're not into that. They have a completely different plan for themselves. On the other side, there are the students who like they've known forever that they wanted to be architects or accountants or whatever, and they're locked in. That's their passion. That's what they want to do. And sometimes I'm envious of that because they knew what they wanted to do for years, right? Whereas I had no idea. I still really don't know, right? What I'm going to do for the next 20 years. I'm having fun now, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But yeah, I think that sort of clarity in your direction is really cool and admirable.
When the kids come in, and I say the kids, let's talk about the rookies that show up. year one
Mhm.
of your class. Do they
Yep.
have any misconceptions of what entrepreneurship is?
I think so. There is a big misconception that every startup raises millions of dollars from, from outside capital sources and, goes public or whatever, right? So I think that's a misconception. Probably the biggest one, right? And the other one that I've noticed is that they spend so much time on the idea and iterations of the idea and really forget about the validation and really assessing that product or service market fit and just the customer validation, right? They get so locked into, this is my big idea that's going to change the world. And they tend to forget about the customer's point of view or the potential customer's point of view. And I always tell them that, the market's going to tell them what it thinks about their product or service. And you're better off doing it before you actually launch. You're better getting that signal before you spend all the time and energy and money to launch. So I think those are a couple of big misconceptions that I see.
And then once they learn that at the beginning, is it about kind of like lean manufacturing? Is it iteration? Like, what do you teach them to validate their idea? Are they just building it, build an MVP if it's a product or a service? Like, how do you guide them so that they have
Mhm.
a path for themselves?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just to ask a lot of questions, right? So, hey, do you have this problem? You do? Okay, great. How do you solve it for yourself now? Hey, if there were a solution XYZ, would that be better? How much would you pay for it? So just asking questions. A lot of students feel like they can't disclose their idea because somebody will steal it or something like that. But I'm very I always encourage them, the more people you talk to about it, the better, because you need that feedback. And yeah, maybe somebody will steal it, but the best they'll be is a really bad knockoff of what you were trying to do in the first place. And you're going to bring your own personality and twist to it anyway. So you're much better off getting feedback from the potential market.
Well, it's the classic market research, but boy, you learn a lot I
Yeah.
did the same with Strata when we got Strata started. Leanne and I just asked everybody that would listen. And I'm telling you, you learn by even what they don't know and you're right. It's so empowering in a lot of ways to validate if your thinking is right, because it's not always right on the money. There's a lot of learning to be had.
No, I mean, you never launch plan A, right? You get pretty deep into the alphabet before you come up with the thing that's going to work. And, and the students that get that, you could see it. I mean, once they fall in love with the problem and are obsessed over solving that problem in the best possible way for those customers, they're the ones you could tell are going to make it.
Love it. Now, so what's the best part of the work you do at Syracuse? What's the best part?
For as much as I teach, I learn so much from these young men and women. I mean, they're something else. I mean, almost everything I learned about social media or even AI lately, or pop music, so many things I learned from these students. So I truly love that. I love their energy. They bring me energy all the time, and we feed off of each other, right? They value my experience and my feedback, and I value their experience and their perspective on life. And it's a really great position, to be a professor at a top ranked university working with amazing students. It's a really cool way to be.
I just love that. And I think I would have never made the assumption that you're learning as much as they are from your
All
experience.
the time. Yeah, I mean, it's every day in class, like I'll say something, or even through their questions, right? They might ask me a question about something I just said or went over that makes me realize, hey, they're looking at this in a way that I hadn't even thought of myself. So I have to adjust my feedback or my response to the question or something. But yeah, they have a completely different life experience, right? They're I mean, and the students I'm working with now are, they were in high school during COVID, right? So this is a very interesting generation of youngsters. So yeah, but it's a blessing. I enjoy working with them, and yeah, I get a lot from it.
So it got me thinking, a lot of people complain about millennials, right? And say, oh,
Mhm.
they're this, they're that.
Yeah.
You experience that side of that group, or are you seeing a different side of that
Uh,
cohort?
you know, Sometimes I get a little, frustrated or whatever, but for the most part, I really enjoy them. It is, in my experience, this generation is especially kind.
Okay.
They are very sensitive though, right? So there's a lot of sensitivity and there's a lot of anxiety too, but in general, I find them very kind. I use this example all the time. Like, this was maybe last year, the student was walking through the front of the class and he dropped his stuff on the floor and it, went all over the place and he was embarrassed. He had to pick it up. A few students came up and helped him, right? 10 years ago in that same classroom, students probably would have laughed at him or made him feel uncomfortable, right? But everybody went to his aid to make sure that, hey, it's okay, we got you. So but yes, they do tend to get sensitive. I find that sometimes they can be easily offended by things that I wouldn't find offensive. But yeah, so it does make you think about things a little bit differently.
Interesting. But you feel good about the future with these young people, right?
I always say it. I cannot wait until this generation is in charge, so they can fix everything that we buggered up. I think they're going to do really well, and I'm super optimistic about the way the world is going to go once they take the reins. I truly am, and I'm not just saying that. I really do feel that this generation has a lot of potential, and it's going to be okay based on from where I sit.
Well, they're the one thing I've observed is they're incredibly and almost insatiably curious, aren't they?
Yeah, they want to know. Yeah, for sure.
It's good because it's the way you described yourself. You approach your teachings as a reciprocal opportunity, and that I'm not sure every prof does that. My experience, although it was a long time ago, it was not that at all. It was not that experience being taught by professors. So good for you that that's they must feel that as students as well that it's open for them to have that conversation with you as opposed to your old wholly omnipotent know all John. That's not how you approach it, right?
No, and I think they do feel that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Beautiful. Let me change gears a little bit. You and I had an incredible experience. We met and built our friendship over YPO.
Mm.
YPO, for those who don't know, is an organization of CEOs, 35,000 peer group of CEOs, 140 countries in the world. And for me, and I know for John, it has been a life-changing exercise. But tell me about your experience on the board. And although we can't share all the details of what we did, what was the best part of that, and what did you learn about yourself during that exercise?
But yeah, so the best part of it for me was just the connections that I made with other members who raised their hand to be volunteer leaders in a peer organization. Right. I think there's something unique about people like that. So like, yeah, our connection, we never would have met. We wouldn't have stayed in touch. So that, something like this has been probably my favorite thing about it. But I did learn one of the most valuable things I learned was how to lead a little bit differently. So, as you probably remember from being on the board, none of those people there are your employees. None of them have to do what you say. And as a matter of fact, they're used to being the ones who give the orders. So in order to get things done, you have to lead very differently. And I think it was Scott Mordell, the former CEO, who used the term "bring people along." So it was just a completely different way of persuading, presenting data, listening, overcoming objections, and getting things done by bringing people along versus just command and control. And the other thing I learned is that my temperament is not especially well suited for committee work like that. I don't particularly enjoy it. I find it draining. Although the one accomplishment that I'm most proud of from our time on the board was getting YNG passed. So when I was chair of the family committee, Santiago, who of course you remember, was the chair of the family committee right before me. He had teed it up, got everything in place. and it was really just my job to get it across the finish line. And now YNG is such a integral part of the organization. There's so much great stuff going on. I love it. And so that's probably the thing I'm most proud of on my board service.
Well, funny how timing is. I just had a chat, and I'll keep names out of it for the purposes of podcast. But talking to the folks in New York this morning about the YNG chapter, they
Mm,
have up 300 or 400 kids that come through that
yeah.
chapter. I kind of went, "Are you kidding me that all
Mhm.
of those young men and women are being impacted and are impacting just the way you described that reciprocal stuff?" And
Yeah.
I had no idea it was that big, especially when New York's a big city, but that's a big number.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, my daughter is going to Mumbai in a couple of weeks for their big event. Yeah, and it's really cool to see these youngsters just, just going for it and making connections, and it's really fun. And but at the time, I don't know if you remember, but during our deliberations, the YNG was contentious, right? People, it wasn't a slam dunk that this was going to happen. But I think now looking back, people would think, wow, what would this organization be without that?
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it comes back to, you know, always fighting for what you believe in. I think that's what we both learned, that you can fight. And if it's not about you, then people will give you more credence, because
Yeah.
there was no gain for John or for Alan or whomever did something. It was more about serving, true servant leadership. Uh,
Yep.
and you're right. There are those moments that you kind of look back and go, that was worth all the pain and
Yeah.
travel. And although the travel wasn't so bad, let's be honest, it wasn't
No,
so.
no, that was amazing. I mean, my photo album is pretty sick for the places we went, the things we got to do for sure.
Well, it's funny about that photo album. So for those of you, at the end of our board service, they provide a beautiful book, which is really a chronology of all the board calls you. And behind me, I have kind of what I call my memory room. And the reason that's there is for gratefulness, is just to be able to say, what an opportunity I had. Yes, it was a lot of work. Yes, there was a lot of board reading. Yes, there were a lot of contentious times, but oh my God, that experience no other human can have. And how
Yeah.
fortunate are we? And that book, every time I look at it, I tear up. I kind of go, look at that, because you remember the people and the relationships and the experiences with Anne Marie and with Dee Dee, and like all those things come back, flooding back, even though it was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was super cool. I'm privileged to have been able to do it. Yeah, no, but now I'm really enjoying being a member and taking advantage of just being a member, not engaging in volunteer leadership, because it's good to give other people that opportunity and experience.
And that's, I think, key for everybody to think about, right? Oftentimes, when you're serving in any organization, there's tons of great organizations, is that there is a path for the others, and you've got to give them the time.
Hmm.
I get
Yeah.
asked all the time, can you serve here? I'm going, no, I've done it. Let someone else
Hmm.
learn and grow and have the experience I had. Yeah, anyways, I'm glad we shared that together, and can continue our friendship as well. So that's awesome. Let's take a little bit of a left turn right now, and talk about your entrepreneur journey with respect to your discovery of ADHD. And you had a TED talk on it, which I listened to yesterday. My business partner, Leanne, is a full-blown ADHD, so write a book on how to work with people with ADHD. But tell me
Yeah.
about how you discovered that, and some of the data is quite shocking, actually, and maybe share a little bit of some of the highlights from your TED Talk that might be helpful for other entrepreneurs listening to this.
Yeah. You know, I didn't develop ADHD as an adult. I've always had it, just didn't realize it, right? Because I was able to get by and manage it as best I could, and it gave me some interesting advantages in certain contexts. So my company was young, we were growing, and I just realized that people were you know not having an easy time with me and my crazy ways. And like, for example, we'd have what at the time I thought was a good strategic planning session, we set our direction. And then the next day, hanging out at the water cooler, I talk about this great idea, that I think we should chase after. And everybody's like, whoa, where's that going to fit in? We just set the whole course for the year. What are you talking about? And I was just thinking out loud and having fun because that's fun for me, but it freaked everybody out as a small example, right? But in these types of things would happen all the time. So, somebody just suggested that, maybe I talked to a psychologist about this. So I reluctantly went in. So actually, I think it was a psychiatrist. And they did the whole evaluation. I actually had to write home and have my parents get me, send me either copies or the originals of my report cards from elementary school. And the comments were really, it was like, if John would just apply himself, he could do so much better. Or he gets his work done early and then, disrupts the other kids in the class, all this other stuff, right? Or I was selling bubble gum in school, and I'm not allowed to do that, whatever it was. So it was a clear it was clear that I've had this my entire life. I didn't just develop it as an adult, but as an adult the implications become much more significant and more real. So I thought, hey, if I really want to make this company work, I've got to take care of this, and I've got to manage myself so that way, when I show up, I'm being the best leader that I can be to get the best out of everybody else. And, I think too often we think, well, it's all about us. They've just got to adapt and deal with me. And that is a path you could take, although I found a lot more success if I could just manage myself or enlist the help of somebody else in managing me to get the best out of the organization and the people around me.
Fantastic. So tell me about that TED talk you did. Share a couple of stats with me about entrepreneurs in general and what you discovered.
Yeah. So interestingly, so first of all, in the general population, it's probably around 12 to 13% of people end up getting an ADHD diagnosis, somewhere around that. Now, after I got my diagnosis, and I was working with that for a while, and being in YPO, you've been at these events, like you walk into a room and you can feel the ADHD in the room, right? It's palpable. It's everywhere. So, I think I had just come back from an event, maybe a regional conference or something, and I was just like, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is quite a population, of movers, shakers, big thinkers, but really, really impulsive and hyperactive. So I talked to one of my colleagues at the university who researches this a lot, and I said, hey, look, I've got a hunch about this group of YPOers. I think they've got a lot of ADHD. What do you say we study it? And he thought it was a good idea. So we did a survey of 500 YPO members in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Network. So we kind of, selected that group. And what we found was, I think it was either 62 or 63% of them identified with traits consistent with the diagnosis, which is, many times higher than the general population. And it's just, if you know this group of people, it just makes sense, right? So many of us have this, and for better or worse, right? And when it's working great, but when it's not working, it can have some pretty negative consequences and ramifications. And we see people who deal with that as well. So that was super interesting. One thing that I thought was kind of funny is that we sent out 500 surveys. I forget the exact number, but it was about 100 of them came back incomplete. Like we couldn't even use them because whoever was filling them out just didn't fill them out enough for us to use all the data. So that alone, we hadn't even crunched any numbers yet. And we're like, oh, okay, I think we know where this is going.
That interesting. It's funny. I jokingly on my LinkedIn, I have a title called Chief Squirrel Tamer. And the reason I have that is because in our work at Strata, we work with CEOs, right? And my business partner being full on ADHD, that's what I feel like I am sometimes. I'm just kind of trying to rack everybody and stack them. And no, we were talking about this, and I know you got me there. Let's kind of bring it back to
Yeah.
where we are, because I don't have ADHD, and I'm pretty processed and focused guy that way. So, but you need to have the understanding. What I found, John, which was fascinating for me in having Leanne as a business partner, as you've described, it can be a superpower if harnessed properly, and a disability if you're in the wrong place. And but your subordinates or your partners need to understand that to be able to work best with you, understanding that that stuff harnessed right can be really amazing. Is that what your experience has been?
Yeah, for sure. And just to clarify that, so there's two main types of ADHD. One is inattentive, and the other is impulsive and hyperactive. And the data with hyperactive and impulsive correlates really well to entrepreneurial outcomes.
Got it.
Not so much with inattentive. So it's really just one type of ADHD. But yeah, if you can harness that, So what we found was that in the context of entrepreneurship, it can be an advantage.
Hmm.
But I don't want to minimize the fact that this can be very debilitating for a lot of people on a regular basis. So I certainly don't want to make it so that people are like wishing, oh, I just wish I had ADHD so I can be an entrepreneur, because it can be very difficult and debilitating, and a lot of people have incredible outcomes on medication. For me, I found that I couldn't do it. Like my appetite, my sleep, my creativity, my problem solving, nothing felt normal for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I was easier to manage, but I wasn't performing well. So I think that was a big problem. And so if you're experiencing the negative side effects of ADHD on a regular basis, like we know, people are more likely to get divorced, more likely to go bankrupt, more likely to get poor performance reviews by their supervisors, all sorts of negative things, right? There's also comorbidity with anxiety and depression and other mental health issues. So if you're experiencing those, absolutely I would consider medication. Luckily I wasn't experiencing those too much. Really it was just I wasn't quite getting there where I just knew or thought I could with the business. And it was truly because I wasn't leading well based on just the way I was made up. I just assumed that, well, people got to deal with me. This is my organization, deal with me or leave. And then once you realize, hey, no, I've got actually really good people who, by the way, are great at the things that I'm terrible at. And let's work with that. So, I think your role in your organization makes Leanne better because yes, you can be that squirrel tamer, right? Because when people say, hey, that's a great idea, but what about, the things we just talked about, it makes me think, okay, yes, let me dial this back a little bit. I've got enthusiasm for this other direction, but I'll do that silently or talk to my forum about it or something, because it's true that we've got to focus on the things we said we were going to do.
But you're right. Harnessed is there's a brilliance that the way ADHD people think that is different than others. And so harnessing that creativity, which is what we have in our business with Leanne, she has a brilliance about her that I kind of go, where did that come from? And it's really related to her brain works differently than mine does. And that's a beautiful thing. We don't want two Alan McLaren brains going out there. You know that. We don't want that.
Yeah, and it's a different approach, right? So like in a normally wired person, you would collect the facts, you would deliberate, you would think, and then you would act, right? That doesn't work with somebody with ADHD, right? What we do is we act, and then we collect the facts of what happened as a result of our action. Then we iterate and act again, right? So it's a slight difference. And I know I drive people nuts. People who need to plan then act versus act then evaluate the action then plan again. It's tough for both of us, Yeah.
Love it. And there's also another correlation. Dyslexia also comes with
Yeah.
it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know exactly why, but it does co-occur in a lot of people. Yeah, and it's just, it's indication of that, neural diversity that we see in a lot of people like that.
Interesting. All right, last place I want to go with you is a big passion of yours that I discovered after a quick call with you on WhatsApp. Your passion for health longevity, and you actually spoke to our forum group and helped 8 people at the time, get on a journey of health. So I want to thank you for that because I think it's really
Awesome.
launched us. But tell us about where that came from, and tell me about your journey in that space and what you're doing in that space as well.
I think like a lot of people who are in that position, like you put so much into your business or your career or whatever it is, and you suffer as a result, right? So the first thing to go is your sleep. So all right, I'm just going to stay up all night or stay up late, or I'll get up early, or I'll go out and drink, because that's how you make connections, whatever it is, right? So sleep goes. You make other poor choices when you're tired, you eat poorly, maybe you drink more, and it just becomes this, terrible downward spiral. So I was in that position, probably in my early 40s, maybe. I mean, for a guy that young and as relatively active as I was, there was no reason I should have been as unhealthy as I was. Biomarkers were not going in the right direction, and I was just looking at my blood work and labs and researching some of these trends, and I was thinking that this is not sustainable. I'm not gonna ever meet my grandkids at this pace. So that's when I got out of traditional Western medicine because it was, the 7 minute encounter, prescribe the pill, we'll see you next year, everything looks normal without any real dialogue or anything. So, I've been working with a functional medicine doctor for 10 plus years now. My doctor's appointments are 2 hours. I mean, we dive deep. I do blood work every quarter so I can kind of see what's going on. But it was really just because I wanted to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I did not want to spend a career trying to build wealth only to see it evaporate in my final years because I was paying for or managing a chronic disease that was largely preventable. I didn't want to be a burden on my family. I wanted to be able to do the things I like to do, and I'm not really concerned with the number of years that I live. I don't have a number in mind, although I think I could live past 100. Right? I mean, it's becoming more and more possible, but that's not really the thing that I worry about. I want to live as well as possible right up until I die. Right. I want to compress my period of morbidity. I don't want to deal with chronic disease. Um, I'll just die when I die, maybe even out in the ocean on my surfboard. Who knows? But I want to be healthy and vibrant and able to do the things I like to do, for my lifespan.
And it's the way you were describing, it appears to be a selfish act, but it's really a selfless act, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, like if I'm just healthier and better, I'm going to be better for everybody, right? I'll be a better leader, husband, father, friend, everything. I'm more clear, I mean, more clear than I've ever been. I mean, one of the probably the biggest change I've made in the past 2 years. Now, since I've been, I was wearing a Whoop band, now I wear an Aura ring, but I don't drink
Mhm.
much at all anymore, and that used to be such a big part of life. I mean, as an entrepreneur or a member, I mean, whatever you do, there's always a cocktail party or an event or whatever. So I think just that one behavior, almost eliminating alcohol. Now I still do have alcohol. Like I'll have a glass of wine, or I don't know, it's been 20 years since I drank beer, but like on a hot day, a cold beer, I really like it. But I hardly drink at all. My sleep is so much better. And when you sleep better, everything else gets better. Your body restores and rejuvenates. And it's just this virtual or virtuous cycle. So I forget where I was going with that.
No, no, no.
ADHD.
I asked selfless versus selfish, right? So
Right,
it's
right.
you
Yeah.
said it's a little bit of both, right? It's funny, John.
Yeah.
I just went through as we all do, and everybody takes kind of January as a big. So I did the Dr. Hyman
Oh,
diet,
yeah.
eliminate
Amazing.
the four things, and I'll tell you what I learned. I learned about the drinking part that you described. But no dairy, no alcohol, no caffeine, no sugar. And I'm definitely a sugar addict. It's like cocaine because of the
Oh,
dopamine.
me
Right? I
too.
know it.
Yeah.
So, but what we've done coming out of that, both Henry and I, is that we made a decision that we got to have an 80-20 rule going forward. So if we still like sweets, so now it's Greek yogurt with a little protein powder and a little stevia as opposed to ice cream. Well, wow, what a difference, right? It's still got my sweet tooth, but I'm making better decisions. And then when I want to blow it out, just blow it out. When I have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. But it was the learning for me was eliminating those things that were kind of toxins, right?
Yeah.
Gluten and sugar and alcohol and
Mhm.
go. So it was a wake up call for me. And now, so we're not on the same kind of longevity journey you are, but it's what you eat is who you are, right? Who you can become.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's incredible. I mean, especially with the alcohol, right? It's a known neurotoxin, zero benefits, but it's so ingrained in our culture. I mean, you can't avoid it. But I mix cocktails now with these non-alcoholic spirits like Seedlip and Zero Proof and that kind of thing, and it gives you that fix of wanting to mix the cocktail and experiment and have fun, and it calms everybody else around me down, right? The hardest part about not drinking so much is there other people's reactions, right? They get very uncomfortable if I'm not drinking. So, I'll do a soda with bitters or soda with grapefruit or make my own cocktail, and everybody calms the heck down a little bit.
That social pressure is. When we
Yeah.
talked about peer pressure, you work with a lot of kids. Peer pressure when you're a kid is tough, but it's tougher when you're an adult, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually on that, the kids, this college students that I work with, they don't drink as much as we did when we were that age. There's a very low, it's much less than when I was a college student by far.
So, John, I know you're not a doctor, so full disclaimer, everything I'm going to ask John is not medical advice. But what were the one or two learnings that you have that you would love to pass on to people listening today about your journey with
Yeah.
longevity?
So the first thing is that everybody is very different, right? So, if you're scrolling through reels and you're looking at longevity experts telling you to do this and that, it's great and you can learn from it, take it with a grain of salt, but you've got to test and not guess, right? So make sure you're doing proper blood work. And, if you're still dealing with the modern medicine, where they see you for 7 minutes and prescribe a pill and you're out of there, I would recommend you look for an integrative doctor or a functional medicine doctor and see the difference. So yes, test, do your blood work, get a sense of your KPIs. What are your key performance indicators? Know what your body is up to right now so you can make some changes. So it's hard to make blanket recommendations for everybody, but there are two things that almost everybody can implement. The first is getting better sleep across the board. We don't sleep well as a society, but if you can fix that, you're going to be on your way to much better health just by doing that. And it's hard. There's a lot of tips and tricks to that, but yes, you can research how to do that with cold rooms and blue blocking glasses and no screens and all that kind of stuff. The other is avoiding alcohol, which also leads right into sleep. So if for me, one drink within 3 hours of bedtime completely wrecks my sleep architecture. And almost everybody I talk to has that same guidance. If you have a drink within 3 hours, your sleep is just not good. Even though you think you're falling asleep faster, your architecture throughout the night of your REM and deep is really poor, and you're waking up the next morning not rested. You're getting up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, all sorts of things like that. It's just a terrible mixture for your sleep. I do find that if I day drink, if I have a beer in the middle of the day, it doesn't really affect my sleep that much at night. But eliminating or minimizing alcohol, especially 3 hours before you go to bed, can be transformative. And then this isn't true for everybody because metabolic health is super unique and different for everybody. But for me and a lot of people that I talk to who are kind of dealing with the same thing, the less I eat later in the day, the better I sleep. So if I can have my last meal, my sweet spot, oddly enough, is 3:30 p.m.
Hmm.
If I have dinner by 3:30 p.m., my sleep is incredible. I feel great the next day. And actually, I don't even go to bed hungry that much. But if I do, I'll have a little snack. And the interesting thing is when I wake up, I'm not even hungry after something like that, because it gives your body that chance to actually rejuvenate and detox and that sort of thing. So the two recommendations for everybody: get better sleep, avoid alcohol if you can, and find a doctor who's a functional medicine doctor or an integrated practitioner and get your blood work done so you know where you stand.
Awesome, dude. This was a fun conversation. Just felt like you and I were having a non-alcoholic cocktail in a bar. It was great.
Absolutely.
Don, thanks for being with us at Stratus. A great story, some great insights for everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the other side, brother. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan.